The bonus list came out first thing Monday morning. It was posted on the internal server, same as always. A PDF file labeled Q4 Sales Bonus Final. I clicked it without hesitation. I already knew I had the highest numbers that quarter. I had brought in over $3 million in new business. My quota was $1.2. I wasn't expecting a surprise, but I got one. At the top of the list was my brother Jacob. Below him, way below, was me. I stared at the screen. My number was less than half of what it should have been. There was no mistake. The totals were edited. I checked the document's metadata. It had been updated that morning. By our father. No warning, no explanation, no call. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't storm into the office. I stared at that number like it was a sentence, not a slip. There wasn't even the dignity of a phone call, just a number quietly lowered like I wouldn't notice. But I noticed, and I remembered. I simply saved the file to my desktop, forwarded it to my personal email, and stared at it like it was a case study. My name is Rachel Helm. I'm 31. I worked at Helm Solutions Group, the company my grandfather started for 8 years. I wasn't just a salesperson, I led the team. I trained new hires. I brought in our biggest client. I built processes. I made that bonus, and they gave it to my brother. At 9:12 a.m., Jacob strolled into my office with 2 coffees. "Rough morning?" he asked, handing me one. I didn't answer. He took a seat across from me without asking. "Listen, I know it looks weird on paper, but Dad thought it would be better optics if I got the larger cut. Said it helps with the image of me stepping up." Stepping up? He closed 2 accounts last quarter. One of them canceled within weeks. "I mean, you're the workhorse," he added. "I'm just helping steer the ship." I looked at him. Really looked. He wasn't smug. He wasn't sorry either. He was comfortable. Like he believed I would accept this, like I always had. And maybe I had. Until now. It wasn't just this one thing. It was a pattern. 2 years ago, I was promised a leadership role, Director of Sales Strategy. I trained for it. I built out the plan. When the announcement came, Jacob got the title. I was told it was just a title swap, that I was too valuable to move from my current position. Last summer, I brought in a Fortune 500 client. I wasn't invited to the follow-up lunch with the board. Jacob was. Dad said I wasn't the face of the company, but I was its engine. And now they were trying to convince me to smile while they gave away my reward. Number not this time. I took a sip of the coffee. It was sweet. He didn't even ask how I take it. I opened my drawer and pulled out a black notebook. I had been using it for years. Client notes, sales patterns, renewal cycles. That morning I flipped to a new page and wrote, "If they'll take it once, they'll take it again. Leave smart, leave quiet, leave with leverage." And then I circled one name, Franklin Partners. They were our biggest client, and they were mine. They always said we were a team. That was the line growing up. Family first, business second, but success for all. It sounded noble. It sounded fair. But like most things in the Helm family, it only applied when it benefited the right people. My father, Gerald Helm, was the founder and CEO. Sharp suit, silver tongue, a reputation for fairness, so long as you didn't look too closely. To the outside world, he was a self-made leader. To those of us inside, he was just good at rearranging stories, especially stories about who did what. Jacob, 3 years younger, average student, charming enough to talk through a missed deadline, was always positioned as the future of the company. My job, apparently, was to clear the path for him. Quietly, repeatedly. It didn't matter how many clients I signed. Jacob got the credit. The bonus swap wasn't a mistake, it was part of a long pattern. They'd been preparing him to take my seat while pretending I was never supposed to sit there. I had proof. The contract I negotiated with Franklin Partners 2 years ago, one of the firm's biggest wins, was still saved in my private folder, annotated, signed with my initials on every revision. But at the last quarterly meeting, Dad had said, it was Jacob who brought Franklin across the finish line, a real milestone for his career. He said it with a straight face. In front of the board, in front of me. I didn't correct him. I remembered what happened last time I tried to. It was after another meeting, Q2, the year before. I had pointed out that one of Jacob's closed deals had come from a lead I sourced and nurtured for 6 months. Dad waited until everyone had left the room, then closed the door and said, "Rachel, you don't need to fight so hard. You're not in competition with your brother." But I was. They just wouldn't admit it. It wasn't about gender. It wasn't even about merit. It was about their need for a story. And Jacob fit that story better than I did. The polished son stepping up to carry the family name. The daughter? She was just supposed to keep the machine running until he got there. I stayed 3 more days after the bonus memo. I smiled during meetings. I sent follow-ups. I passed Jacob in the hallway and we exchanged polite nods. But behind the scenes, I was building my exit. I contacted Franklin's procurement manager, Michael Tran. We had a professional relationship, but I knew he trusted me. I asked to meet for coffee, off the record. I said it was personal. He agreed. I also called a recruiter, one who had reached out last year when I wasn't ready to leave. This time I told her I was open. I gave her a specific list of firms. One stood out above the rest. Corvest Analytics, our closest competitor. I knew what Corvest wanted. They wanted Franklin. They'd been circling that account for over a year. They just couldn't get through. I could. Meanwhile, at Helm Solutions, no one saw it coming. Jacob was busy preparing a growth roadmap he didn't understand. Dad was planning a speaking tour. HR was finalizing some vague leadership development plan that everyone knew was built around my brother. They didn't ask why I was suddenly taking calls in the parking lot, or why I was printing old contracts, or why I was moving backup files to a secure drive. They were too confident, too used to me staying. That was their mistake. They thought I was loyal. They forgot I was watching. I gave my 2 weeks' notice on a Thursday. There was no announcement, no awkward cake, no photo collage on the break room fridge, just a short email to HR and a 1-line reply from my father's assistant. Noted. Please schedule a final review meeting. Dad didn't call. Jacob didn't say a word. I didn't expect them to. They assumed I was leaving out of burnout, maybe frustration, maybe a quarter-life crisis. That was how they'd frame it. The overworked daughter taking a break while the son stepped up. Let them think that. By the time I handed in my access badge, I already had a signed offer letter from Corvest Analytics, title Senior Client Director. Better pay, full autonomy, and one very specific priority on the agenda: land Franklin Partners. They didn't know I had already met with Michael Tran. It wasn't a sales pitch. It wasn't even a formal meeting. We sat at a quiet cafe 2 blocks from his office. I told him I was leaving Helm. I didn't speak poorly of the company. I didn't mention the bonus. I just said, I'm moving on. But if you ever need someone who already knows your needs, you know how to reach me. Michael didn't ask where I was going. He just nodded once and said, Rachel, we always knew it was you, not him. That was enough. Back at Helm, Jacob took my departure as proof of his rise. Within days, he changed the team structure, reassigning clients he didn't understand, copying parts of my strategy docs and pasting them into emails as if they were his. The office rumor mill said he'd be taking over my pipeline. Let him try. I had already disabled my internal CRM alerts, cleared my desktop, and passed every relevant file to HR. Stripped of context, I left no trail, no shortcuts, no favors. At Corvest, I started with silence. I didn't tell them my full plan, just that I would rebuild trust with Franklin Partners over time. I wasn't there to poach, I was there to prepare. Meanwhile, I sent one email to Michael. It read, "If Helm ever drops the ball, I'll be ready." He replied 10 minutes later, "It's already rolling." I kept my LinkedIn quiet, no big career post, no long-winded reflection. I let Helm think I was fading, disappearing, irrelevant. In meetings at Corvest, I listened more than I spoke. I mapped out my strategy in notebooks. I tracked every Franklin initiative Helm was ignoring, every vendor complaint they buried, every misstep Jacob made. I didn't rush, I didn't react, because I knew what was coming. They had taken my bonus and handed it to my brother like it was spare change. Now I would take something they couldn't replace, their biggest client. Franklin Partners wasn't just another client, they were the crown jewel. Multi-year contracts, international reach, deep integrations. Landing them had put Helm Solutions on the map in our sector. But they hadn't come to us for our family name. They came because I earned them. I still remembered the first call with Michael Tran. 3 years ago. Late Friday. He had been dismissive at first, burned by vendors, overpromised too many times. But I didn't pitch. I listened. I asked the right questions. I followed up, not with fluff, but real solutions. 6 weeks later, we signed a 2-year deal. 6 months after that, I upsold them on data visualization modules that saved them $200,000 in labor costs. Quietly, effectively. Michael never forgot that. So when I reappeared, now wearing a different company badge, he didn't hesitate to take the second meeting. He didn't need a pitch deck. He needed a person who remembered what his team needed before they asked. We met again at a quiet downtown bistro. No suits, just 2 professionals with history. "How bad is it over there?" he asked. I shrugged. "It's not my problem anymore." "Your brother still CCs me on updates I didn't ask for," he muttered. "Sent me a dashboard last week. Half the numbers were from your old structure. I recognize the formatting." I didn't smile. Sounds like he's staying consistent. Michael leaned back. "Look, Franklin's not looking to switch for fun, but we're tired. Missed deadlines, poor support, and no one's listening." I nodded once. That was the opening I needed. "You know what I can do," I said quietly. "You've seen it." "And you're saying Corvest can handle us?" "We've already built the infrastructure. I'm just asking for a chance to prove it." He looked at me, long and steady. "Then prove it." I left that meeting with no promises, just alignment. Over the next 6 weeks, I built the plan: onboarding roadmap, risk migration strategy, account migration without interruption. I looped in Corvest's product team, legal, compliance, every function that would touch the client. No leaks, no noise. Franklin was still under contract with Helm for 4 more months. I respected that, but I also knew how to prepare. By the time Helm realized Franklin wasn't renewing, it was too late. They hadn't just lost a client, they had lost the person who made that client possible. And Jacob? He didn't understand what was happening. His emails got shorter, then more frantic. He copied Dad, then the CFO, but the damage was done. Michael stopped replying. Franklin sent an official non-renewal notice, and Corvest was ready with open arms. The contract landed on my desk Friday morning. Same numbers, new logo. When I signed it, I didn't celebrate. I just filed it. Because this wasn't a win born of revenge. It was a correction. Helm's board met every 3rd Tuesday, like clockwork. Same conference room, same fruit tray, same polished lies. For years I had sat there, quietly delivering results while my father spoke in generalities and Jacob flipped through printouts he didn't understand. But this time, I wasn't in that room. I was next door. Corvest had secured a space on the same floor. Different company, different mission, but close enough that I could see who walked in and who looked worried. I didn't need to be in the boardroom to know what was happening. Word travels, vendors whisper, legal teams flag red lines. Executives panic in predictable ways when their anchor client walks. Franklin's departure wasn't a rumor. It was an earthquake. They weren't just a revenue stream, they were the foundation. Helm had wrapped them into every pitch, every forecast, every growth model. The exit tore a hole through the next 2 fiscal years. And Jacob? He fumbled the response. First came the denial, claiming Franklin was just restructuring. Then the scramble. Then the closed-door meeting that ran 90 minutes past schedule. People emerged pale, eyes darting. I knew what was said, even if I didn't hear it directly. This account was Jacob's responsibility. Why didn't we see this coming? What's our fallback? There was no fallback. I had been the fallback. At Corvest, we watched quietly. No press release, no victory lap. We onboarded the Franklin team over 2 weeks, one department at a time. Smooth, controlled, professional. Michael never brought up Helm again. He didn't need to. Meanwhile, I heard through a former teammate, now interviewing for a role at Corvest, that my father was furious but composed, and Jacob had gone silent in meetings. Morale was falling. Accounts were slipping. Confidence was gone. They didn't know who to blame, so they blamed each other. That's what happens when your business runs on appearances. And I had just broken the mirror. I didn't gloat. I didn't respond to the texts Jacob sent me. Short, panicked things like, "Did you talk to Franklin? This wasn't personal, right? Can we at least talk?" I archived them without replying. He'd made it personal when he took what I earned and treated it like charity. Now I was doing exactly what he never could, holding ground, keeping clients, leading. From a room away, I watched the story shift. I was no longer the quiet one. I was the one they underestimated. And now, finally, the one they couldn't reach. 2 months passed. Helm Solutions still hadn't recovered. I didn't need to track the numbers. I could read it in their behavior. Quiet LinkedIn posts, vague job listings, a sudden uptick in ex-employees applying at Corvest. Even Jacob's tone changed. The last message he sent said, "Can we talk privately?" I left it unread. He was never really asking to talk. He was asking to reverse time, to undo something he caused but didn't understand. But time doesn't work like that, and neither do clients. Franklin's transition to Corvest was seamless. Smooth onboarding, renewals processed early. Their CFO sent me a 2-line email. "This is the first time we've felt heard in a year. Thank you." That email said more than Jacob ever had. At Corvest, things moved quickly. I was given a team, not just a title, real authority. I hired 2 people from Helm, not the dead weight, the sharp ones who had been overlooked like I was. When I offered them jobs, neither even asked about salary. They just said, "We were waiting for this." That was the thing about loyalty. It wasn't blind, it was earned. And once it's earned, it becomes leverage. I wasn't chasing revenge. I didn't leak anything to the press. I didn't burn bridges. I just built a better one. One that Helm couldn't walk on anymore. A few weeks later, Corvest's COO pulled me into a private meeting. He said, "We've been watching what you're building. You're not just bringing in clients, you're changing how we operate." He offered me a new role, Executive Director of Enterprise Growth. More than a promotion, it was a platform. I accepted. The following Monday, I got a formal email from my father. Short subject line, requesting a meeting. The body was even shorter. Let me know when you're free. I think it's time we talk. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Not out of emotion, out of calculation. Then I typed back, I already had a meeting. With your client. I hit send. And that was it. No more explanations, no more justifying, no more waiting for recognition that would never come. Because recognition isn't something you beg for, it's something you outgrow. He showed up anyway. Friday, 10:06 a.m. I saw him through the glass, standing at Corvest's front desk like a stranger. Dark blazer, pressed collar, too calm for someone who just lost a third of his firm's forecast. The receptionist looked confused. He didn't have an appointment. He asked if I was in. She looked at me through the glass wall, hesitated, then buzzed me. I walked to the front with even steps, not rushed, not performative, just direct. Rachel, he said, almost smiling. Gerald, I replied. He blinked, didn't expect that. He cleared his throat. Do you have 5 minutes? I looked him straight in the eye. No. He blinked again. His hand hovered near his blazer pocket, probably reaching for the same notepad he always carried. Old habits. Then, let me say one thing, he offered, tone tight. I didn't nod, just stood there. A quiet yes. He paused. Then let me say one thing. I didn't nod, but I didn't walk away either. I know you're angry, he said. I know things could have been handled better, but this isn't good for anyone, especially not the family. We can still fix it. I let the silence stretch. He continued. You have every right to be upset about the bonus, the recognition, all of it, but you're not thinking long term. You're still one of us, and there's still a seat at the table, if you want it. It was almost impressive, how he could still spin control into generosity. I took a slow breath. Then I said, the table only mattered when I was allowed to sit. He didn't respond. I leaned in slightly. You taught me a lot about control, about silence, about what people notice and what they don't. But what you never understood is that I wasn't loyal to the family. I was loyal to the work. Rachel, no, I said, calm and clear. I spent 8 years protecting a name that never protected me. You gave my bonus to someone who couldn't close a door, let alone a deal, and then you expected me to smile and stay. That's not fair. It is, I interrupted. It's exactly fair, and now you want me to help fix what you broke. His eyes narrowed. This isn't over. Actually, I said, stepping back, it is. I turned and walked away. He didn't follow. Inside my office, I sat down and opened my laptop. A new message had arrived from Michael Tran. Subject, signed, sealed, moving forward. I smiled for the first time in weeks, not because I'd won, but because I hadn't waited for permission to. Across the street, Helm Solutions still had its logo, still had its staff, still had its excuses. But the future? That was sitting quietly on my desk, under my name. Victory didn't look like a headline. It didn't come with applause or a corner office ribbon cutting. It looked like an inbox without chaos, a team that didn't flinch, a client that stayed because they trusted, not because they were trapped. It looked like building something real while the people who underestimated me scrambled to understand how they lost what they never respected. I didn't take revenge. I took control. I let them keep the building, the name, the fiction. I walked away with the only thing that mattered, results they couldn't copy and relationships they couldn't rebuild. Not Jacob's, not his. Mine. I closed the file, locked my screen, and looked out the window, right at the building I used to protect.